All right, good evening, everyone. We are here for our September 11th Audit Committee. Full board is present. I am joining remotely from Wilmington, Delaware. First item on our agenda is review of the minutes from June 5th. Those minutes were circulated with the materials for the meeting. Anyone have any comments or questions on the minutes?
No.
Okay, great. Item number 2 on our agenda is review of the claims auditor reports. We don't have Robin tonight. Jim, are you going to take that one? There's only a few.
I'm good. Yep. So we have 3 items that happened the previous year, but after the last audit committee meeting. A couple of them were lacrosse decal package, mudville tournament entry. Third one being a purchase order dated after the invoice for tires and rims for an elementary school tractor. We only have one exception in the current year, and that was basically due to timing. It's very difficult at the beginning of any fiscal year to get things in for the Coal Writers Institute because it starts so early. So that one, the one PO for the guest speaker was not in place before it was paid. So that was the only item there. Other than that, everything's been going fairly smoothly as far as the claims office.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Jim. Anyone have questions on the claims auditor reports? Okay, hearing none. We'll move on to the third item on our agenda, which is the current function level status document for the general fund. And someone just rang my doorbell in my room. So let me see if they want to come in and join the meeting. Hang on one sec.
I was wondering what that was. Hi, I'm from Voorheesville.
I couldn't make the meeting that.
This question.
Would
it be hilarious?
It's so awesome.
Can't touch the room service.
Anyone?
Okay, well, no, that was that person did not want to join the meeting. Hilarious. Okay, the function level summary document. So per usual, it includes a look back of the previous 5 years and then our projections for the current fiscal year, so 23-24. And Jim, I'll let you comment on any of the specific categories, but first I just want to say great job in terms of coming in so close. Last year, the year before, it really is remarkable how close we can get on, what we budget versus what's expensed and encumbered, and then what the actual is. When you're done commenting, Jim, I do have one just general question, but if go ahead.
Yeah. So I decided to keep the 22-23 in there where it's at currently through the initial part of the audit, just so you can see that, and also do 23-24 as we've started. To give the expense as of, what was it, last Thursday, I think it was, last Wednesday, and the expense and encumbrance as of that day as well. So you can see that as far as the 22-23, we did have a little encumbrance in there, a little under $300,000, but that's what carried over as POs in the current year. 23-24 actual expense so far is about $3 million. The expense and encumbrance is 4.2 approximately for the items that have been put in for the year. Not everything has been put in. We haven't put the payroll encumbrance in because we just had our very first payroll of the 10 month on Friday. As soon as that kind of settles down and stabilizes, that may be the next step to put in an encumbrance for the payroll. And going forward, those numbers will slowly climb towards the budgeted number. Other than that, I mean, there's nothing too significant at this point. We've just started the year, so.
Great. Thanks, Jim. The question I had was for some of the categories where we either budgeted too much or too little, and it's not by astronomical sums or anything that raises concern, but some of those categories, like I'll take operational plant as an example. Like we budgeted for 22-23 1.23 million. We spent 869, 870-ish. And then we budgeted again 1.274, and that's just an example. But for those types of categories where we end up budgeting the same amount that we budgeted the year before, is it due to like one-time expenses or one-time savings? I'm just curious how those amounts are determined.
It depends. Usually when I'm budgeting an area, I look at prior few years and try to get a baseline for those specific line items and either project that out with a percentage or adjust that based if it's, lower than what it's supposed to be, or if it's higher than what it's supposed to be, it can be adjusted downward as well. In this case, we did not have a full staff the full year. So some payroll expenses were not there, but you have to budget for them knowing that those positions exist. So there wasn't much of a significant difference, like 3.5%. You have to increase all the contractual stuff and things like that. So that was the basic difference between the two budget amounts.
Okay, great. Thank you, Jim. Anyone else have questions on the function level summary document?
No, thank you.
Okay, great. So we'll move to item number 4, which is our school lunch profit and loss statements for May and June. Christy, are you going to take those?
I am.
I see you. Great, thanks.
So we ended the year at negative $7,000. We would have been roughly 56,000, but we got $48,000 from the federal and the state, which is a one-time aid that we could only get for last year. And if we were 56,000 negative, we would have had to take $10,000 from the general fund. That's about all I got.
Okay, so Christy, which line is the 50? I can't remember the number you said, the one-time money. Which line is that?
It's not in there. It's not showing you that because the $48,000 is in the report.
It's in one of the federal or state aid lines, so it's kind of bundled in.
Gotcha. What is the supply chain? I think it's assistance line. Is that
item, the 48,000?
That's 42,000.
Oh,
42.
Supply chain assistance.
Yeah.
Okay.
The 40. That's
the equipment side was the other one, the 48.
Yeah.
Okay, so last year in December, we were told, hey, look, you've got too much fund balance because you've got more than 3 months worth, you have to spend it off. So we spent 48,000 on new equipment. So starting right out, we should have been 48,000 in the hole. Because we're supposed to use up 48,000 of fund balance. We only ended up 7 in the hole because we got that 42,000 that came in. So basically balanced itself as far as what it would have been versus what it actually was.
Got it. Okay,
but
great.
So.
I understand now. And then, I mean, overall, finishing the year only down, less than $8,000, I think was pretty amazing. And it looks like a lot of it came from the other sales again, right?
Well, the ironic part of only being down $7,000 is they're going to come back and tell us we have too much fund balance again. So.
What's too much? Is it supposed to be 0?
No, it's supposed to be no more than 3 months worth of expenses. So you divide that out by 12, multiply it by 3, or just divide it by 4, however you want to do it. And you come up with the number you're supposed to have.
And something less than 7,000?
No, it's, in our case, we spent a little over $600,000. So it would be approximately $165,000. When you divide it out, it's about 55,000 a month times that 3. So that's what we're allowed to have, 165. We actually have somewhere, what's the number?
Oh, I see, okay.
What is it,
210, the bottom line.
203 or something like that.
203, yeah. This bottom line, yeah, 202. So 165, 202, they're gonna say you have to spend $37,000. We'll find some equipment that needs replacing that will help us when the kitchen is fully redone down at the elementary, or something up here, and we'll get it taken.
Yeah, so that was my question. Do we have any currently unmet equipment needs or one-time cafeteria type expenses?
There are always items that can be replaced. There are definitely priorities in that order. So we're going to take care of the ones that are more priority right now.
Okay, good. All right, anyone else have questions on school lunch profit and loss? Seeing none. Okay, so item 5 is a follow-up on the conversation we had in our last, I think it was board meeting, where we went over the reserves. And I had posed some questions to Jim about, trying to get a better understanding of what funds could be transferred to what other funds and what were the limitations and restrictions. So there was a summary document, a chart basically attached to the meeting materials that provides a nice summary. Jim, can you spend a couple minutes and just walk everyone through it?
Sure. So this is created by Quest Arbosi's State Planning, which we are a member
We
of.
have a chart, we have a,
Yes, it should be under
what's it called?
fund balance for web or fund balance for online, something like that. It's,
I can.
Fund balance chart.
yeah, something like that. Should be on.
Not logged in.
That's it.
Let me
Okay.
see.
I'll make sure to send it around so you can all review it, but I'll just give you a general overview. So when you get it, you can understand what it is. Basically, it has all the different reserves that we can actually use, and the legal citations. You could look at the law if you absolutely wanted to, put yourself to sleep. There's a purpose for them that's specifically enumerated in the law. How it gets established. Now, a lot of these are by Board of Ed resolution. So for example, retirement contribution reserve, workers' compensation reserve, unemployment insurance reserve, those are all set up by Board of Education resolution. So you create those yourself as a board. Most of them are like that. You have the repair reserve as well, insurance reserve, property loss reserve, Evlar, which no one should use. I'll just be real honest. Tax certiorari reserve. Of course, you have the authority to fund that because that's just taxes that doesn't need any other approval. Mandatory reserve for debt service is when you sell a building and you still have debt on it. So you have to set the proceeds aside to pay that debt off. Obviously, we don't have that situation here. Reserve for tax reduction, which is the other side of selling a building. If you have anything extra over the debt service, you have to set it aside to reduce the future taxes because the taxpayers paid in to get that building that you sold. And the capital reserve. So that's the only one that absolutely needs voter approval, is the capital reserve to set up. And we've done that over the years, and we have one that's we're about $3.5 million at most in that goes to 10. So we still have $6.5 million that we can fill with any additional monies that we have.
One thing about cap reserves that people don't understand is if you put $6 million in and you take $2 million out, you only have $4 million left to go in. You don't, it's not like a bank account where you can keep adding in what you've taken out. So you can only get, so let's say it's 10 million and you have 6 and you take 2, you can only put another 4 in. You can't go over that again. Some people get confused by that.
The maximum amount you can put in is the amount that's done operates. You can't just recycle it. So yeah, same thing. If you put in 6, you got 4 left. It doesn't matter how much of it gets spent afterwards. So
Right.
it also has funding sources where you can pull money from to put in there. Most of them are budgetary appropriations or other funds or other reserves. Expenditures, that's a little different. So that tells you how you get the money out. Separate BOE authorization is for most of them: retirement contribution reserve, workers' compensation reserve, unemployment insurance reserve. You have to have a separate authorization unless it's been included in the budget as a revenue source. It can be included in the budget as a revenue source if it's approved by the taxpayers. You're all set. It's already there. The approval's there. You've already made your authorization. Durations are listed and any restrictions. So once I send that out to you, you'll see more of it. But basically, you can go through this and say, well, here's what we need to do to use this specific fund or to create this specific fund. And most of them are going to be authorizations by the Board of Ed to spend. Public hearing is required to spend from the repair reserve. The voter approval for the capital reserve. So there are a few that are odd. Most of them are going to be Board of Education can set up and Board of Education can authorize use. Some of them are more restricted though. So
There are some that you can only put in a certain amount. So like the ERS, TRS, they cap you on how much you're allowed to put into it yearly. The tax cert, you have to have justification of why you're building a tax cert reserve. So you have to know that there's pending litigation regarding a tax claim. If not, you can't set up that reserve. So there's like specific things you can do when it comes to those.
you have to actually have the certiorari in hand before you can put money into that account from the taxes. Other things, I mean, there are limitations, like Frank said, ERS, TRS. ERS doesn't technically have a limitation. The TRS side of it does, because when they set that out many years later, they said, okay, you can put 2% of your TRS salaries in there every year, but you can never have more than a maximum of 10% of the salaries total.
TRS is Teacher Retirement System.
Yeah, sorry,
Sorry.
a lot of jargon, I know. So Teachers Retirement System, they set it up differently, and that's partially because the way TRS is funded is strange. They take a certain amount in September, October, November from our state aid and pay it directly to TRS. Whereas ERS, we have to actually make the payment. So it makes more sense to have a kind of unlimited reserve.
And we'll ask for Jessica to put this up on the board doc so it'll be updated for public as well.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful. I mean, it really is a pretty easy to follow guide. And, you know, the column I was paying the most attention to was restrictions, just because, you know, from the conversation we had last time, we had bulked up some reserves, you know, not in a way that was unjustified, but just that there was a lot of money sitting there. And if the question came about, you know, how do we move it? I think this document addresses that pretty clearly. So thanks for that, Jim. I know you haven't seen the document, everybody, but does anybody have questions at this point? All right, so the last item we had on our agenda was a discussion on potential agenda items for future audit committee meetings. Frank and I and Jim had met to just discuss audit committee agendas for this fiscal year. And there were a couple of items that we talked about that I wanted to present to everybody. And then also just make a request for any future items that anyone else would like to talk about in audit. One of the ones that we had talked about was a continuation of the athletics discussion that we had started last spring. And we haven't really closed the loop on, and I don't know that we ever could or will. But my thinking on that discussion was, you know, given my lack of experience with Title IX, I'm not a a Title IX lawyer, and really none of us are. I thought it might be helpful to start with some just foundational education for all of us on Title IX. And I had talked to Frank about and Jim about potentially bringing in someone who was, a Title IX lawyer, or at least had sufficient knowledge in this area to really educate us, just as sort of level setting before we really dig in on any of our specifics as a district. So I wanted to put that out to everybody as one potential topic. And then a second one, which is somewhat related, also on the athletics funding front, had to do with what expenses are appropriately booster club expenses versus district expenses. And I think a really easy example would be uniforms for a sports team, right? So the district will fund the cost of uniforms, but the district would not fund the cost of, fancy warm-ups with kids' names on them and those sorts of things. And there have been questions, at least during my time on the board, about certain improvements that have been made to athletic facilities or fields, structures, et cetera, and who paid for them, and whether that was an appropriate expense to be incurred either by the district or a booster club or some outside organization. So those were two potential topics that Frank and Jim and I had discussed. So I wanted to put it out to everybody. Are those topics that the board is interested in pursuing through audit and just kind of educating ourselves on those issues? And then if there are other topics as well, I'd love to hear them.
I was nodding my head when you were saying.
Okay,
that.
good.
I think, but I'm just speaking for myself here.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree with you, RJ. I like those items.
Okay, good. And we can just go around. I see Tim. Tim, are you good with those?
Yeah.
Robin, I don't know.
I think we can look into any kind of discussions when they come up. That seems to be something you're interested in talking about, and it sounds like they're legitimate, so let's do it.
Good.
I don't know if we need an attorney to come in. Wouldn't the High School Athletic Association provide us counsel on that?
I'm not sure, Tim. I think potentially someone from NISBA, but we haven't explored it yet.
Yeah, the High School Athletic Association, I don't know, I don't have the name right, much longer acronym. Yeah,
New York State
they
Public
have-
Hospital.
yeah, they have a outreach arm that would advise us as to things that would be appropriate in that regard, I think.
There's also, Title IX is also a little bit wider than athletics as well, is something we were talking about. So having an understanding of how that impacts whole district kind of services and organizational structures, and maybe down the road looking at a Title IX audit in regards to educational organization might be something that we want to look into after we have a foundational understanding of it. I agree with the athletic that NISBA has, and when we get to those levels, I think there's resources, but
That's all I was thinking about. I was a
Yeah.
little too narrow-minded there. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good. Barbara, are you good? And any other topics?
No, I was nodding along with Rachel as well. Yeah, I agree. Those are great topics.
Okay, good. Anyone have any other topics they think we should tackle in audit?
Not off the top of my head, but I'll think about it, RJ.
Yeah, if anyone comes up with any, just shoot me an email or give me a call and we can pencil them in for a future discussion. In designing these two topics, we really tried to stay focused sort of on, what as a board can we do, and it's, policy and funding, and that's kind of where we wanted to stay with these particular discussions. So we'll see what comes of it, but thanks everybody. I think that concludes our agenda. Our next meeting will be November 6th. So we will see you all then. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Art. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
We'll be back with you.